What's up, Ego Hackers? Welcome to the CS Joseph Podcast, Premium Edition. I'm your host, CS Joseph. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. This is season 12, part 2, episode 2. How to optimize social interaction as an ESTP, which is a pretty fantastic archetype, if I do say so myself. And given the events of the day, I definitely have a few anecdotes to share relating to ESTPs in terms of their social acceptability, as well as one of my own. Faced Mind Temple down, and basically we're faced right in our face by Mind Temple as to how socially unacceptable we are to the Mind Temple, which is actually a very common occurrence for ESTPs and ENTPs to deal with, and that's because of our FI trickster. So in season 12 we talked about social compatibility and how from just a pure nature perspective, how human nature ends up determining many outcomes in terms of social interaction. Human beings, by nature, by design, are social creatures, and everything in our lives is based on relationship. However, if we're not really in a situation where we as a race are just not really that capable of doing everything on our own. Sometimes we're put in positions as men or women who are doing things alone, and we don't have that choice, but it's definitely not our nature. It's not what we were made for. It's really not who we are, which is sad, but also entirely understandable. So there's a point to that. There's a reason for that, and that is ultimately because our brains, our minds are basically entirely disconnected within, but also disconnected from other human beings. And ESTPs understand this probably the most, because out of all the 16 types, the ESTP, whether or not they'll admit it or not, is the one type of the 16 that craves connection, that craves intimacy with fellow human beings more than anybody. And that can be simultaneously a strength and a weakness. The weakness being that they find themselves in situations where they are oftentimes pressured in their loneliness. Sometimes they're pressured into loneliness. Sometimes they're put into loneliness against their will. Sometimes they're left behind. Sometimes they have to suffer with fear of missing out, basically, which also ends up becoming a problem. Which is pretty sad. It's pretty sad that they have to deal with this. It's pretty sad that just in general, by default, they're not really accepted. They're not really even able to be sociable, even though out of all the 16 types, this particular type craves social interaction the absolute most. The absolute most. Sometimes I just have no choice but to feel bad for them. Consistently. Every ESTP in my life, every single one. It could be my cousin Nick. It could be my mentor Robert. It could be my ex-wife. It could be Shaylee, the bartender right here at the Beacon, who is working now. And she's as cool as ever, but sadly she's leaving and blowing this popsicle stand, and fair enough. I quite enjoy the popsicle stand. But she herself is struggling with, acceptance. One of my main God functions personally is extroverted feeling, always raising my own level of acceptability, as well as raising the acceptability of other people. And even from my own social acceptance and optimizing my own social interaction, I really have to make a decision between, okay, am I doing this for growth or am I doing this for survival? And that's one of the main themes that ESTPs also have to figure out, because it's just part of like an ETP perspective that ends up happening over and over and over again. ETPs, when you look at the battleground of Titans, from extroverted intuition hero or extroverted sensing hero or extroverted sensing demon or extroverted intuition demon, it ends up becoming a big problem over time. Very big problem. And so because of that and due to that, we have to think about, okay, am I really truly accepted for who I am? Like we're hypersensitive to acceptance because we have extrovert feeling child, right? And the ESTP is so external, they're hypersensitive to it. They could be the most loneliest of all the types, but then at the same time, I have the God function of extrovert feeling, which means like that lack of acceptance also hits really hard as well. And it's interesting because I literally see and I fighting the same battle on the same day, even though we're not even together anymore. And there's no way I'm going to allow us to be together again. Absolutely not. But she's still part of my life because we have a son together. But the point is, it's just so fascinating how she is in effect walking the same path that I am, but just from the other side of it. Because due to the battleground of Titans. It's one of the reasons why her and I was even able to even have a relationship as the kindred, because we're both on the same path, and it's like, yeah, life sucks. Yeah, I get it. So, but here, at least I can be kind to you. At least she can be kind to me. That kind of approach. Because that's what the kindred relationship is all about. It's all about kindness at the end of the day. So, and that's the thing. Kindness, though, is a very extroverted feeling, introverted feeling thing. It's a very feeling thing. And it's kind of hard for us because we come off like we're naturally soulless because we have FI trickster, being that we are amoral people who lack morals. And it's not that we're trying to be immoral, trying to be bad. It's just that we don't know how to be good. That's a problem. We just don't know how to be good. And the problem is, too, is that we know the truth about good or bad. We know that it is subjective. We know that being good or bad is a subjective thing. Sure, truth is also subjective because truth can change over time. The thing is that you have to be willing to accept that in the moment, something is true or false, always, in the present. Doesn't mean it'll be true or false tomorrow. It doesn't mean it'll be true or false yesterday. But always in the present moment, something is true, something is false. And that's something ETPs have to come up with, especially ESTPs, because of how external they are, that in the present moment, something is good, something is bad. But we all know it's based on, they know at least that it's based on the interpretation of their specific audience and how they're being received. It's just so interesting to watch extrovert intuition demon be naturally undesirable, in as much as we have extroverted sensing demon be naturally off-putting and uncomfortable to the people. Like for example, I walk into one of my favorite establishments earlier today, and the proprietor comes up to me and tells me to my face that I'm not welcome anymore because I make his staff and his clientele uncomfortable. Did I actually do anything incorrect? No, I did not do anything wrong. I'm just dressed really weird, right? It's because it's cold. It's cold. And I dress differently than typical people do out here when it's cold. Like I walk in wearing tech wear drip instead of flannel or something. And I engage with the clients, their clientele, have conversations with them. But now I'm being told in order for me to come back, I'm not allowed to use their restroom. I'm not allowed to speak to anyone there. I absolutely cannot practice my butterfly knife on the street in view of anyone while I'm on the phone. I just can't do it. Even though I'm a regular customer and I treat them very well and I tip well, but that doesn't matter. Just even though I've gone on my way to produce satisfaction for them, they're not going to give me that same respect that they give everybody else, which is lame. Thing is, though, is that ESTPs have a similar problem. They go out of their way to justify other people's behaviors, maybe even make excuses for other people's behaviors, or be forgiving or absolve other people of their behaviors. But then, do those same people return connectedness, return intimacy back to them? No, they don't. And then it just leaves the ESTP feeling used and feeling utterly and completely alone. So I would like to dedicate this particular lecture to my now ex-wife. masculine idealism just the way that it is, because I allow my masculine idealism to exist. I allow myself to love those who do not love me and who do not treat me well, because I can't help it, because masculine idealism. I just have to learn to have boundaries, self-respect like everyone else, to make sure people don't take advantage of me when I give them that love and care and that compassion. But it's so interesting, like when you have people like Mind Temple who own those types of establishments, because we were there together once. She was extremely loud, made everyone uncomfortable, and now that falls on my reputation, even though I had nothing to do with it, right? So because of that, like, once again, her and I end up in the ditch together, as like this huge amalgamation of dejection and rejection at the same time, right? Which is pretty rough. It's pretty sad. But then again, like, here's the thing. Do we have the right to blame everybody else for that dejection or that rejection? Do we have a right to question society and make it society's fault? Or do we have a responsibility to grow and actually gain those social skills to make ourselves better? That's always the question. It's always the question that an ETP has. It's always the question that an ESTP has. And it's even harder for an ESTP to answer that because they have SI nemesis, because they forget. I loved her dearly. She was, quite frankly, in effect, when I first met her, the first woman in my life who actually truly showed me her heart and showed me her pain. It was beautiful to me. She was beautiful to me. But I lost her along the way because I wasn't behaving in the way that she naturally needed. Not only that, I was conditioned into not taking the lead. I was conditioned to not lean into my masculinity. I was conditioned into thinking about how I should treat women instead of not what to expect from them. Because of that, I was not able to lead her in a way where she was able to meet my needs. And due to the lack of leadership on my part, she fell apart. But at the same time, she also had this baggage and abuse that she even lied about and she hid from me, that I had no idea that I was going to have to deal with. But at the end of the day, I still chose to love her. I still chose to care for her. I still chose to be there with her. But at the end of the day, right, it just comes down to whether or not I can forgive her. I do know that humanity is ultimately commanded to forgive and to love our neighbors ourselves. So I do forgive her. And it's not just because I'm commanded to do so, it's also because, I get her, I understand. I totally understand. She's beat down, probably the most beat down person I ever met in my life. And she suffers greatly. She suffers every day of her life. Probably some of the greatest suffering that I've ever seen in a person, in a woman at least. And, she suffers so much that she can't receive love. She can't really receive a man. And that's what it's like to be U to UF as an ESTP. Even though there's a few other UDF women in my life who also behave the same exact way. Like Beth, for example, But more on that for the ISFP Social Interaction lecture. But one point that I would like to make as part of this introduction, before we actually get into the meat of the lecture, one really important point I want to make is that ETPs, we have this question mark that's so hard for us to figure out. And that is, the ESTP's perspective is, am I really growing? Am I really growing my social skills when I'm becoming more accepted with my FE child by others? Or am I just being fake for them? Shouldn't it be okay for me to be accepted for who I am? Or is it more about should I just be more accepted about who I am? Or is it Or should I really change for everybody else? And it makes them feel fake when they have to. Consequently, ENTPs like myself have a similar problem. Do we be okay with wearing masks 100% of the time to survive the social norms of society? Is anyone ever truly going to accept us? Is anyone ever really going to truly love us? Or do they just love the mask? You see? Do they love the show? Or do they love me as a person? See, that's the question. That's the question that plagues our minds every single day of our life. That's what it's like to be FI trickster in this world, in this society, this seemingly God-forsaken society. But God has not forsaken the society. You know, our mission statement about ending fatherlessness and turning the hearts of fathers to their sons and hearts of sons to their fathers, so that God the Creator does not strike the earth with a decree of utter destruction, to bring back masculinity so the mature feminine can thrive again, so that our children have a future again. You know, that mission alone basically shows us that, like, hey, you know, perhaps maybe it's actually us who need to be challenging society. Maybe we need to be a challenge for people and not play along. Because if we really do bow down at Mind Temple's feet and are like, hey, yeah, I'll wear the mask, or hey, yeah, I'll be fake just to be in your stupid ass society, how is anything ever going to change? How is fatherlessness actually going to be solved? So this lecture is dedicated to all the FI tricksters out there. Shaylee, Robert Bryant, my ESTP mentor, my ESTP cousin Nick, my other ESTP cousin Nicole, and all the other ESTPs out there who I don't know. But just understand, like, and also, God, I love him. There isn't a single ESTP that I've met in my life who embraced the safety of being fake for the sake of survival, such that I'm concerned that he's UDUF now, but he didn't have a choice. This choice was taken away from him. I love him. I hope he's okay. And I hope one day in the future, you know, he'll come to me and shake my hand, you know, and he'll tell me that, yeah, Chase, wasn't your fault. And I'll tell him, yeah, man, it wasn't your fault either. It just is what it is. So, but I want all the ESTPs out there to know this one truth. I fucking love you. I fucking love all of you. And I fucking understand you. And I'm so glad you people exist. And I'm so glad you're here on this earth. And I'm so glad that you're masculine. And I'm so glad that you're challenging. And I'm so glad that you're willing to step up to the plate and challenge this stupid Mind Temple society and help others, help us all bring it to heal so that it can be fundamentally changed so that we can have a future for our children. We shouldn't have to be social chameleons to survive. Instead, we should be working together to build a better world, to build a better society so that our children can actually have a future. I don't want anyone in this community, like seriously, just drop the judgment. Just drop the judgment towards ESTPs, seriously. Yeah, she fucked up. Yeah, she betrayed me, all this shit. But you know what? Forgive her. Forgive her. I forgive her. Forgive her. Jesus saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Just forgive, okay? Forgive and give them a chance. Now, there's another ESTP girl right there. She actually works across the street. Almost forgot about her. She wanted to be on the show. So, but yeah, forgive them. Seriously, folks, forgive them. Because you may not actually realize it, but the ESTPs, at the end of the day, just like Commander Shepard in Mass Effect 2, they fight for the lost. Just like I fight for the lost. The thing is, though, not every ENTP naturally fights for the lost, but every ESTP I've come into contact with their INFJ subconscious, they fight for the lost because they know what it's like to be lost. They know. And they just so desperately want to be found. So forgive them. I beg of you, forgive them. And choose to love them. Choose to understand them. Choose to accept them. So, what are the fundamentals of social interactions for the 16 types? In all social interactions, regardless of social context, the instinct to achieve one's cognitive origin is always present. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. It doesn't matter what person you're engaging with. It doesn't matter who's engaging with you. Your interest and their interest at the end of the day is ultimately achieving and gaining one's own cognitive origin. Your primary origin and your secondary origin. Primary origin for your ego temple wheel, and your secondary origin for your shadow or your super ego temple wheel. 2 wheels trying to gain your origin, as it should be. That's what everyone's going for. Dale Carnegie has his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's an important book. It's a great book. I highly recommend everyone within this community reads it. If you haven't read it yet, what the hell are you doing with your life? Seriously, go read that book. Yeah, it's super old, but the principles still apply. That book is evergreen. There are people who have tried to write different versions or updates to that book, but from my point of view, I either haven't read the best book or they've all failed. So I could be ignorant or they have failed, because that book is essential. It is absolutely essential. Cognitive origins, while typically unconscious, they drive the single most important piece of knowledge to use for skillful and dynamic social interactions. What is more important than knowing what you and others are seeking most? The sexual agendas of hypergamy and polygyny, the female sexual strategy and the male sexual strategy, while more socially restricted in certain environments, like professional, they're also always present. And the sexual agenda can override both nature, compatibility, and nurture simultaneously. But it's always important that you guys remember, like, when it comes to social interaction, that like sexuality always trumps nature, and then nature always trumps nurture. Nature being a personality type, and your nurture being octagram. But like when it comes to like sexual relationships, it's really important to know, like for example, when a man or masculine man initiates with a woman, right? When he initiates with a woman, he's doing it because his sexuality is what turns him on to the woman. And then he initiates with her using his nature, right? And then be it with SI or NI, right? He'll initiate with her. And then that creates a nurtural experience that is sent from his nature to his nurture. And his nurture is communicating that with the woman. And that creates nurture for her. And then she receives that into her personality type, which then ends up tantalizing or not tantalizing her sexuality, basically. And it's this Ouroboros system between the sexes, basically, for the sake of social interaction. So it's always important to be aware of the sexual agenda. If there is anyone who is present of the opposite sex, please be aware of that risk, because that's literally how opposite sex relationships end up starting. Same-sex relationships, because men prefer compatibility with fellow men and also women. So it's always important to understand this dynamic regardless, because it's always impacting relationships, friendships, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's always happening. So many suffer socially due to the ignorance of other people's types and what others are seeking. And many suffer from the brainwashing which blinds the realities of intersexual dynamics. Masculinity, femininity, and polarity are driving forces in all human interactions. Individually, becoming aware of our social blind spots, for example, our trickster functions and our demon function, and leveraging our innate social gravitas, such as cognitive origin and our parent function, etc., these things are vital in cultivating social skills and trusted connections. Something I've noticed that ETPs seem to struggle with the most, given our external perception demon functions. It's no different for the ESTP. And that's why I have a huge soft spot for my kindred type, because they suffer the same way that I suffer. Literally, they suffer the same. But let's talk about some more of those negative social perceptions that ESTPs end up encountering, right? So the colloquial perception of ESTPs is that they are, by a rule, practical, street smart, usually relaxed or easygoing and easy to get along with, resourceful and performative, so they perform a lot. They're also seen as being temperamental, getting angry quickly, flaky, impulsive, inconsistent, lazy, and above all, giving up easily. And oftentimes their octogram is a big influence on their perceptions. ESTPs commit social faux pas, and they come from two primary places: thinking their performance will solve everything, and being ignorant of how their blind spots sabotage them. Though our hero functions represent our innate strength, the more we pridefully lean into our hero, the more we become blinded by our hero's insufficiency and our demon function's reality. The more we feel entitled to our hero's glory, the more unintended damage the demon function will end up doing. Which is really rough, watching any demon make them desirable or undesirable when their God function of expert intuition, their desire to be desirable, is present. It's really painful. I mean, at least my expert intuition hero isn't a God function, or at least my expert sensing demon is also not one of my God functions. So ESTPs have it even harder than ENTPs. They have it even harder because of that, which is really sad and painful. So the more an ESTP only focuses on performing and getting the most attention, the more undesirable they will be. Here's a really great example of that. There's the law of power. It's the first law of power. And it goes like this: never outshine the master. And out of all of the 16 types, it's actually Soul Templars, ESTPs and INFJs, who have the hardest time following the first law of power. They oftentimes, because their temple wheel with their deadly sin of lust, they cause other people to lust after them or be jealous towards them, right? Jealousy is also just another word for the word lust, basically. And that can be a huge problem for ESTPs. And because of that, people and any person can be the master. It doesn't have to be someone who actually is in a position of authority. It could be any person. And because of that, they're outshining the master by default. And they don't even know that they're violating the first law of power, the law of power that gets them in trouble by default. In fact, the example provided by Robert Greene in the 48 Laws of Power, in the first chapter, which is Never Outshine the Master, gives, talks about this guy who inadvertently outshined the master, and then he was killed. He was killed off. And that guy, what was he? He was an INFJ. Sucks to be him. So oftentimes, ESTPs have to learn how to temper their performance and give an 8 out of 10 performance instead of a 10 out of 10 performance, because it will cultivate jealousy among their coworkers, their colleagues, people in their family, anyone, maybe even their partner. And I hate saying partner, so husband or wife, right? Like that could happen. That could be a big problem. So yeah, major problem. So ESTPs who lean exclusively on their SE hero try to suck in as much attention as possible without offering freedom or space for others, meaning that they don't really give other people the opportunity to shine, and that's what creates jealousy. And jealousy, while it can be a powerful ally, it can also be a powerful enemy and literally get to the point where it can end someone's life. And it's usually the ESTP or the INFJ's life who is ended because of that deadly sin and mismanagement of their deadly sin in that context. So these ESTPs will find themselves not being invited or included to others' activities, or they may find themselves being put to death in certain situations. So you got to be careful. You got to be really careful. This is going back to the argument where, should I really allow myself to be fake in order to survive in this environment, in this society? Well, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to not show the real you because no one really actually accepts the real you, and it sucks. But that's what you have to do to survive. It's what you have to do. It's what I have to do to survive too. And oftentimes, this is why ESTPs are constantly loyalty checking. It's also why ENTPs are trust checking, because we're just trying to see who actually really does accept us. We're trying to see who we don't have to be social chameleons around, basically. So for the ESTP, just because you're getting attention doesn't mean anyone wants the performance or even desires you because of the performance. There's oftentimes where I talk about how ESTPs give the performance that nobody asked for, right? Just like the ENTP, for some reason, gives choices nobody is comfortable with, right? Which ends up creating further alienation. That's why ETPs just, with TI parent, we just alienate people by default. We just alienate people. But there is some good through that alienation. There is some good because it can help us separate the men from the boys. It could separate the women from the girls. Just who actually wants us, just who actually is going to stick around for us, right? Who are the people that we should be valuing for sure with our FI tricksters? Who are the people that we should be contributing to with our FE child and to give our child to? Who are those people? So while it is inherently a negative thing, it can also be a very positive thing as well. But such is the way of FI trickster, having that neutrality. Oftentimes we see the negative and the positive simultaneously, and it's just really hard for us to navigate the outcome or the result. So what about the blind spots? All of our primary blind spots are from the demon and the trickster functions. For the ESTP, the first major blind spot is FI trickster's delusion. FI trickster is damaging because it often learns to value any attention. They can believe that all attention is created equal and that their worth is dependent on what others value about them. Or, even more damaging, that just because someone is providing attention means the ESTP should invest in them. This is especially how ESTP women let themselves be taken advantage of, which is what happened. And she has suffered great suffering in her life. And it's just really sad. I didn't really know about it until later in our marriage, just the full extent of her abuse. It actually wasn't until we weren't married anymore that she revealed to me even some more of the things that she had been dealing with, because it came out in therapy. Because ESTP's SI nemesis likes to bury that pain instead of face that pain, because they're Templars. It's so hard for them to face themselves in the mirror, because it's like, does my own FE child actually accept me? Am I worth it? Am I worthy? Am I a person of value, even though I feel like trash because I've been treated like trash? And if I've been treated like trash, does that mean I am trash? It's like this identity crisis that they end up happening. At least the ENTP has the advantage of remembering. But the ESTP doesn't remember. And that ends up being a problem, because they don't remember. They don't. And oftentimes, because of that, their abuse ends up becoming buried. And because of that, it leads to where they start dissociating from their own identity. And it's really sad. And if you hear about things like dissociative identity disorder, DID, I would put forth that DID is just a person being an ESTP trying to cope with this bullshit social scenario presented by society, actually. I think INFJs also struggle with that as well. Shout out to John Bodine as an INFJ who has put together a lot of the analysis and the ideas put forth into this particular lecture series, because it's interesting to see that how even some of his own pain is coming out within his writing, because he very much desires connection with other people in the same way that ESTPs do. And it's interesting just to watch how he shares in their struggle in the same way. So I would just like to say to the community, when you get an opportunity to thank John, please do thank John. He writes from his heart, and he contributes to this community from his heart. And that's what ultimately makes him a good man, because he really does care. He very much cares. So socially, ESTPs would benefit from not forcing experiences on other people. They become desirable by putting in effort, SI nemesis, to make things run smoothly. Typically, ESTPs who contribute more to others will experience deeper connections and higher quality attention. The problem is, ESTPs really struggle, especially UDUF ones, really struggle with giving for the sake of giving. Oftentimes, there's strings attached. And the reason why there's strings attached is because they are their superego, their ENFP superego, has been aware of how charitable the ESTP actually has been. And then when people dishonor their charity by taking that charity for granted and taking the ESTP for granted, what ends up happening is that whenever they give after that point, there's always strings attached, which just further adds to the alienation of the ESTP to other people, socially speaking. God, this is such a painful lecture series. Season 12, Part 2. So painful. And even as I deliver this material to you folks, I feel like a hypocrite. A huge hypocrite. And it's just oftentimes a feeling that I'm exposing my own hypocrisy as a result. I don't regret who I am, but I am willing to take responsibility for who I am. I was watching a video of Tristan Tate the other day talking about how he doesn't apologize for anything, because as a man, why apologize for anything? Well, the thing is that a man who is able to take responsibility for his actions is still masculine. That is his masculine idealism. Maybe Tristan Tate could learn a thing or two about that. Yeah, in general, you don't have to apologize for anything unless you actually do something wrong. You're not God. You're not infallible. You will do something wrong. And every human being knows when they do something wrong versus right within the context of their own mind. They may not know when they do something wrong versus right in all contexts, but the context that their mind is predisposed to, they do end up doing wrong. So that's an area where I actually do disagree with Mr. Tristan Tate on that. But then again, his mind is Effie Demon. It's pretty obvious. I suspect I'll be talking about it more in episode 3 of this lecture series. So, the Fight Trickster can team up with extroverted sensing hero to believe if they can get attention through performing, it must be a good thing. Any demon is the second main blind spot. When FI Trickster and SE Hero team up, the ESTP will perpetually make themselves undesirable by forcing experiences onto other people, experiences no one asked for. People are less likely to stick around and less likely to invest in the ESTP who lacks self-discipline, especially ESTPs who don't go out of the way to use their SI nemesis to make sure that their experiences that they're giving through extroverted sensing hero are not smooth. They're not smooth experiences. So as a result, people are less likely to stick around and less likely to invest in ESTP who lacks self-discipline. Any demon can also trash other people's lives by ignoring consequences, and they willfully ignore consequences. Any demon naturally and usually unintentionally wrecks the progress of others by creating messes, like legal messes, literal messes, injuries, crashes, etc., all in the name of making a great experience, all in the name of having a story to tell. Because oftentimes, ESTPs feel worthless or useless if they don't have good stories or good memories to share with other people, because they're so attracted to those who do share good stories. And it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. I totally understand that need for them to share those great stories and have those stories. And they'll put themselves in dangerous situations to be able to tell great stories. The thing is, oftentimes, they drag other people along with them to put those people into danger for the sake of the story. And then oftentimes will mock those people for not being strong enough to do it along with them. You actually can see this in Grand Theft Auto 5. The African-American character in Grand Theft Auto 5 has this friend named Lamar. Lamar is an ESTP. He's constantly forcing dangerous experiences, dangerous situations onto the main African-American character, who is also an ISTJ, and just obligates him even into being in a gang and committing crimes and doing lots of dangerous situations over and over and over. And yet over time you see their relationship deteriorate as Lamar continues to do this to that main character in Grand Theft Auto 5. It's absolutely a fact. Well, guess what? The other character who came from north of Los Santos, the bald main character, he too is an ESTP, and he does it consistently to the ENTJ and the ISTJ, other main characters as well. So it ends up creating this endless cycle, as a result. So as a result, extrovert intuition demon is the ultimate self-sabotager. Any demon is the tyrant to other people's freedom. If it's not something I want, and I inferior, then no one should SE want it, NE. Until ESTPs understand that not everyone is on their path, they will unconsciously detract from other people's paths. The lesson of the ESTP's any demon is that giving others choices doesn't mean that you are imprisoned. You can still give two choices to others, both of which you would desire too. But more than that, delivering the ultimate experience, expert sensing, necessarily means not deciding what other people should want. Or, even more important, extroverted sensing hero needs to become the warrior and realize that maybe they shouldn't partake in other people's attention. Maybe they shouldn't give other people an experience. Maybe they should, in effect, be silent and do nothing. An old lesson to another ESTP friend of mine, Alex, also known as Elad, on the Discord server, one of the most respected members of the community, by far. One of the most respected people. Well, he taught me a very valuable lesson, and that is two lessons, actually. First is, never underestimate the power of stating the obvious, which comes from his ISTP father and his SE parent. But also, he told me one day, Chase, never underestimate the power of doing nothing. Because sometimes doing nothing is the ultimate experience that extroverted sensing hero can actually deliver. So where is the ESTP's highest social value? So we make a mistake when we assume our hero child or inferior, aspirational even, are our most desirable social attributes. We have to ask, what do other people actually want socially? Do they want a great show of your extroverted sensing hero? For example, when ESTPs overindulge their extroverted sensing hero, they give performances that no one asked for. Do they want to watch you pick your path and relentlessly pursue your vision with your NI inferior? People may be inspired by watching you overcome fear, but do other people really get anything from it? Do they want to watch your extroverted feeling child give and care for others compassionately? A child's gift can be healing, but a child is still dependent on others at the end of the day. That's the most painful thing I read for this lecture. Because I have extroverted feeling child too. And at the end of the day, we still have to admit that extroverted feeling child still depends on the external acceptance of other people. So the function that is best suited to contribute to others socially is the parent function. Through the parent, though the parent can be introverted, like an ENTJ's NI parent, the parent as an archetype is still externally focused, just as a parent watches over their children and their partner. And though compatibility fuels short-term intrigue, like when an ESTP and an ICJ exchange stories and experiences, just because you're compatible does not guarantee social success. What really makes someone desirable to... So you end up having to ask the question, what really actually makes someone desirable to you, ESTPs? People are more interested in what you can do for them. The parent is more focused on what it can do for others. This goes back to my argument that I have with Duggo that cognitive functions, regardless of cognitive transition, regardless of whether or not they're an introverted function or an extroverted function, they still have to internalize and externalize themselves. Introverted thinking parent, well, it's all about what we think is the truth. It is still our responsibility to tell other people the truth. It's also our responsibility to listen to others as well. Because through listening, our TI parent becomes that much more responsible. Ask yourself what you are drawn to in the teachers, authors, actors, and friends that you are compelled by. Thus, that the parent function is what we are most drawn to in other people. It's a sign of responsibility, courage, selflessness, competence, and fearlessness. So, what are ESTPs valued for the most socially? That literally is the clarity and the helpfulness of intelligent thinking TI parent, such that many people think that extroverted feeling parents can be the most helpful, but being helpful in many contexts is something more associated with TI parent. Wow, such humility. A mature ESTP who is committed to facing the truth, especially facing the truth of themselves, facing the truth of their identity or the lack of their identity thereof, being able to face the truth when they look at themselves in the mirror and actually truly assess themselves. The mature ESTP who is committed to facing the truth and carefully picking things apart will naturally cover their blind spots. Doesn't showing someone the lies that imprison them free them? TI parent can free others, expert intuition demon, by destroying the lies that imprison others. So for example, if the ESTP tests a rule or an institution or a person, and the character of that rule, intuition, or person, or institution, or person is proven to be strong, doesn't it mean that it's also valuable? TI parent, so like FI Trickster, come on. TI parent protects ESTPs from valuing the wrong things. But social value extends beyond the parent and goes into our cognitive origin as a whole. What can intimacy and connection offer socially? ESTPs are naturally socially skilled because of their attunement to making other people feel comfortable. As a result, ESTPs should be asking themselves, is my cognitive origin actually useful, and how? What could be more valuable than facilitating connection with other people? The social value is just that, taking part in social interactions that lead to connection, strengthening others, protecting others, and pushing others forward. Intimacy, thus, is the apex facilitator of all human interaction. So, anyway, folks, that's it for Season 12, Part 2, Episode 2, How to Optimize Social Interaction for ESTPs. Thanks for watching and listening, and I will see you all on the next episode.